First, let's go to our friend Caroline Glick, Deputy Managing Editor, Jerusalem Post, and Senior Fellow of Middle Eastern Affairs at the Center for Security Policy. Hey, Caroline, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. Always great to talk to you. Appreciate you coming on from Jerusalem. Okay, the latest, of course, the attacks Israel launching into Syria. At first, it was thought they just were going after rockets that were being transported, Iranian rockets to Hezbollah. But I guess the word is now that the strikes were more massive and did a lot more damage and hit a lot more targets.
Well, I think that, unfortunately, Syria is a target-rich environment, but I think that Israel has, really two main goals here. One is to destroy Syria's surface-to-surface missile arsenal, because that is the arsenal through which Syria can use its weapons of mass destruction against Israel, and also other Syrian military assets that are dangerous to Israel, like their special forces. The other thing is that we see more and more reports of Iran and Hezbollah trying to either take over Syria or win the war for Assad to maintain his regime in Damascus, because he's so critical to their link up, and to Iran's ability to project its power in the Arab world and against Israel. And so we say that Iran was trying to transfer very, very powerful surface-to-surface missiles to Hezbollah through Syria, and they were in bases that are controlled by Hezbollah on the outskirts of Damascus, the Fatah 110 missiles that can carry a half-ton payload, 300 kilometers, which puts them in range of all of Israel's major population centers, more or less. So that was a threat that Israel couldn't countenance and had to take care of.
Now, what do you expect? What does Israel expect Syria might do in retaliation, if anything?
Well, I mean, so far the regime in Syria has been very circumspect, or actually not true. They've been very they've been avoiding any talk of retaliating against Israel. Their deputy foreign minister said, we'll respond in the time and with the way that we need or we want, and what does it matter? It's not to this attack or that attack. We oppose Israel's very existence, so every day is a good day to attack Israel. It doesn't matter what they do. And Bashar Assad was distancing himself from statements that were made by regime officials, unnamed regime officials, yesterday, saying that they were going to retaliate. And that if Israel attacked them again, they would retaliate immediately, because he's fighting for his regime, and he has to concentrate his efforts on fighting the rebels. The Israeli strikes were very important for the rebels because the regime had been making some serious gains on the ground, ejecting rebel forces that had taken control over various strategic sites and towns, and reaching control over the Damascus-Aleppo highway and other important sites in Syria. So this is really something that is a serious setback for the Syrian military and for their Hezbollah and Iranian allies, and so that was also important for the opposition.
How does Israel, though, Caroline, view the rebels? Because, I mean, can we identify the rebels? Aren't there all kinds of Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood and radical jihadists in those rebels?
Of course there are, and Israel's not supporting, these various rebel forces that are fighting the regime. I mean, there are elements in Syria that are opposed to the regime, like the Kurds, that are carving out autonomous regions for themselves, which is wonderful because they certainly deserve self-determination, and they've been horribly repressed by the Syrian regime. Look, the rebels, unfortunately, the United States subcontracted the organization of the rebel forces to the Islamist regime in Turkey, and so the initial opposition force that the Turks developed, that the United States recognized as the legitimate government of Syria, is dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood. And then you have all of these other factions inside of them. 10% of them or more are Al-Qaeda, and the United States defined some of these as terrorist organizations. The State Department did, and then you had the U.S. recognized Syrian opposition opposing the United States for labeling these terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda organizations, terrorist organizations, so that they're defending one another. So clearly, it's not that you want to strengthen the opposition. But look, I mean, from Israel's perspective, we've already fought continuous warfare against Iran's proxy Hezbollah, and now they have 50% of their forces inside of Syria. So to the extent that they maintain their fight against Hezbollah, they're destroying one of Israel's most active enemies, and that's great. And they're destroying Syria's military installations. They're destroying their armored corps. They're destroying a lot of their missiles. They're destroying the rebels are of all stripes. They're attacking their special forces units, which is important. Their artillery, their air force. So, I mean, Syria's military has been vastly degraded. You have massive amounts of desertion among the Syrian soldiers and officer corps. This is a good thing. Syria is an enemy.
Yep. No, I hear you. Listen, Caroline, I really appreciate you coming on today, and we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Caroline Glick, ladies and gentlemen, the Deputy Managing Editor of Jerusalem Post.